Hello there. It is that time of the week, the weekly Wednesday live with yours truly. My name is Juha Ruokangas, your humble servant on a mission from the gods and goddesses of fretted instruments. As you remember, thank you for all the comments and messages. Guys, I received since last week the sort of a comeback episode after a long break of doing this podcast. Many have sent their support for my coughing that is still persistently ongoing after I had the COVID 5 weeks ago. I also have received some heartwarming pieces of advice, tips. Thank you. Your support is very much appreciated. And to those who asked, yes, I'm fully vaxxed. And yes, consulting with my doctor too. Nothing to worry too much about. I'm sure I'll be good as new in a week or two. Okay? All right. Today, I have the privilege and joy to interview a dear friend, an award-winning composer, fretted and fretless guitarist, an Arabic oud player, educator, doctoral researcher, and a good human being, Jussi Reijonen. Welcome, Jussi.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Let's do one thing. Yeah. For some reason, I want it that way. Don't ask me why. Welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome. It's really nice to have you. Let's see. We have a lot of comments already coming in. Hello, guys. Greg, Dan, Eksynyt Molekyyli, long time no see. Mibu, hello, nice to see. Hannu. Yeah, keep those messages coming so we know you're there. Yeah, Jussi and I both grew up in Rovaniemi, up north on the Arctic Circle. So should we do this interview in Finnish maybe? Pohjoisen murteella veetään.
Pohjoisen murteella mennään.
You know, you can talk. Mostly, I'll write the subtitle like Prima Vista.
Oh, sure, yeah.
in English. Yeah. Jokes aside, Jussi, while my life has unfolded here in Finland for most parts, growing up, becoming a guitar maker, in the meanwhile, your journey, on the other hand, has been very different. But before I unleash you to tell us more about that, I would like to set the mood for this evening with a piece of music. You released very recently the first tune. I think it should be called a single, even though it's not like a radio single type. Exactly. 7 minutes and something long. From your coming album, 3 seconds, Kolme Toista.
Yep.
Is it okay if we watch together the whole video, uninterrupted?
Sure. Please.
Yeah. Okay, dudettes, we will now practice together some active listening to music, okay? What does active listening mean? You'll learn actually more next week when I'll be interviewing another fine musician. But shortly, active listening means simply that if you are multitasking there right now, like now, doing other things and having this podcast as your background noise, stop, please. Put the other stuff away. Thank you. And listen, okay? Don't do other things. Listen to the music with us together, okay? Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, from Jussi's album 3 seconds, Kolme Toista, The Veil. Thank you, Jussi.
Thank you for listening.
What can you say after that? Man, I don't have words. We will talk about the music, the album, a bit later. Right now, let's just leave it be as it was. But my first question: you were born in Rovaniemi. Then what happened?
A lot happened. So yeah, I was born in Rovaniemi, right on the Arctic Circle. My parents' house is about 6 kilometers from the Arctic Circle. And when I was six, my father got a job in Amman, Jordan. So we moved there and we lived there for 2.5 years. And that really was, I think it was maybe the most significant event of my life in the sense that it really set it really kind of set me on a certain path. And of course, when you're 6 years old, you don't really know and understand what that means or will mean. But it was a huge, huge event that has informed everything that I've done and everything that I've been and become ever since. So we lived for 2.5 years in Jordan. Then we moved back to Finland to Rovaniemi for maybe a year and a half, something like that. Maybe 2 years, I forget. Then we moved to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania for another 2.5 years. And then we moved back to Finland. Then we moved to Muscat, Oman, and from there to Beirut, Lebanon. And then by
Wait
the
a
time
minute. Wait a minute. And at this point, let's say Lebanon, you are age what?
In Lebanon, we moved there in '95, so I would have been 14. And
Okay, teenager. Yeah.
yeah, so we moved back to Finland in '96 when I was 15 years old. So between age 6 and age 15, there was a whole lot of back and forth, and all these different environments, different languages, different cultures, different people, more schools than I care to count.
Yeah.
And then after that, I have to give credit to my parents because they listened when I said I was kind of an introvert teenager, and I started to feel like I was suffering from the constant moving back and forth, and I really wanted to have what teenagers want. I wanted to have a social, stable circle of friends, and I wanted to try and meet girls and everything like this. But we were always moving, so it was hard to really settle anywhere. So then when I started, what in Finnish education system is lukio, or a 10th grade
college
equivalent.
or yeah.
Yeah, equivalent of 10th grade in high school
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
in the US. My family then listened when I said that I'd really love to be in one place for the 3 years of high school. So then the family settled in Rovaniemi, and my father kept traveling to more and more places for his work.
And you went to the same school that I did.
Yeah, I did, which is really funny because I had no idea until we talked in the summer.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in this. Well, obviously, a few years earlier, but it's the same school, anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's so funny how many overlaps there are in our
Yeah, and
paths.
even when you talk about the moving a lot,
Yeah,
that earlier I said that I kind of my life unfolded in Finland, but there's still that similar undertone of moving from place to another. I mean, yeah, I was born in the north. Then when I was 1 year old, we moved to Porvoo, which is in the south coast, and when I was 8 or 9, we moved to Rovaniemi. And then when I was, and in Rovaniemi, we moved several times from different side of Rovaniemi to another. So it meant changing schools a lot. And then in the middle of my 9th grade, my parents tell me that we moved to Riihimäki, which is again in the southern Finland. So I'm kind of just like the part, okay, not the cultural changes, nothing like that, not the languages, but that same feeling of not having time to kind of, grow your roots anywhere,
Yeah.
because it's just moving. And and whether it's a coincidence or not, and people knowing me from my later years might not kind of believe it, but in those years I was definitely as introvert as they get, and whether this has something to do with the fact that you're kind of like feel like the kid, the teenager, who whatnot, like you feel like the guy outside looking in, and not having the social circles like that, has to do
Yeah, I
with
was
the
wondering if in your
introvert.
case it had to do with the moving, because I think in my case it definitely was a big part of it. I don't
Yeah,
know to what extent
absolutely.
it was also my personality, but
Yeah, both, but
yeah.
yeah, definitely, and has to do with a lot of with self-esteem, and things like that
Yeah,
for
yeah,
myself.
sure.
Yeah, with which I've kind of struggled a lot during those years, and later on,
Yeah.
kind of then process it a lot later. But we're gonna talk about that. Yeah. Okay, so we are now. Wait a minute. You were in Rovaniemi. You went to the school I went
Yep.
earlier on, and then
Yeah, so then I went to all of the Lukio, or the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade of high school in Rovaniemi. And then eventually after that, I moved to Helsinki. Originally, I tried to do the what I was told is the reasonable thing to do, which is get a real job. So I went to study physics at the University of Technology in Otaniemi near
yeah,
Helsinki. But it felt I was really hanging on by the skin of my teeth there. It was way above my head. And also, I remember I had this very profound moment. I forget if I told you this in private once, but there was this moment where I felt really out of place and kind of as if I'd boarded a train in my life that was going in the exact wrong direction. I really wanted to be a musician, but my my father especially was very concerned that it wouldn't be enough to make a living with. And at the time I didn't have any formal training in music. I had learned from friends and the Rovaniemi library. Back in those days, this is pre-internet, we had to actually go and look for
yeah,
records and CDs and cassettes and tablature books, and everything was just really guitar magazines. I was just devouring everything I could. So I didn't have the formal educational background to really even consider seriously a conservatory. From where I was
yeah,
looking at things, I don't know if it was similar for you, but I think, well, the Finns who are listening to this, if there are any out there, they'll know the Popiats Conservatorio, or what used to be known as Ogeli.
yeah,
Now it's
yeah,
Helsinki. And when you're in Rovaniemi as a teenager and you're trying to get your guitar stuff together, you hear about this mythical place, that there's
yeah,
this conservatory. And
yeah,
you start to, how rumors spread, and in Finnish we call them fishing stories. The fish gets bigger and bigger and bigger as the story gets passed on. I formed this idea in my head that it's impossible to get in, that it's only for, you have to be basically Mozart to be accepted in these schools. So I went the other way and I tried physics, but I was, as my friends, they were spending every waking moment, they were thinking about equations and scientific theories and things like this. I was daydreaming about music. I was, melodies and rhythms and running scales in the, air guitar or things like this.
What
And
type of music would you listen to at that time? I mean,
at that time, I mean, I was always I got into music because of the Finnish band Dingo when I was 4 years old. So
yeah,
that was, for the non-Finns listening, that was like a mid 80s Beatlemania equivalent in Finland, this
yeah,
pop rock band that was just mass hysteria. And the girl down the street, who was my best friend when I was a kid before we moved abroad, her brother had, I forget if it was Kerjäläisten Valtakunta, the second album, or Nimeni on
yeah,
Dingo, the first album, but it hit me like a ton of bricks. And from
yeah,
that moment on, I was just obsessed with music.
yeah,
So it was really, we'd play with my friend. I was always Neumann, the singer, so I had my hair done up, but I was playing air drums. I was the
yeah.
drummer in the band when we were playing, and of course she was my girlfriend. But I was Neumann, who was actually the singer in the band, who did not play drums. So I had some kind of a gravity towards the drums happening.
Hmm.
And then from Dingo, it went to 80s hard rock, progressively heavier. I think by the time I was in my high school period in Finland, and then later in at the university in Helsinki, it was a lot of pretty heavy stuff. I mean, I'd gone through my Panteras, Fear Factories, Machine Head,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And Dream Theater was definitely a big influence at the time. It was basically the faster, the more complicated, the better. I was just really into this shred mentality of guitar. But also, I have a very good friend of mine who had moved to Rovaniemi. He's known as Mr. Crab in the guitar circles in Finland. And I won't say his real name. I don't know if he wants it to be public
Yeah.
or not. But he was like my sparring partner all through high school. And he was always, I don't know, he had this kind of a relationship with the guitar that I'm still trying to catch up with. His technique, his touch, his instincts, his ear, his compositional ideas, it was incredible to try to keep up with him. And we had a band
Hmm.
that was very much trying to basically emulate what Paco de Lucia, John McLaughlin, and Al Di Meola were doing in the guitar trio.
Right. Yeah.
But there was a distinct Django Reinhardt and Stoffelo Rosenberg influence
Okay.
as well in there. So it was like acoustic fusion, trying to play as fast as we couldn't, or at least as fast as I couldn't. Mr. Crowd was okay. But so it was, at the time, that was basically my world. It was in between the acoustic steel string shredding and then the electric
Yeah.
virtuosic guitar playing school. That was really
Yeah.
my thing. But it started to feel more and more like I wanted to branch out a bit more from there.
Yeah.
But I remember I had this moment when I was still trying to study physics. I was there for 1 year,
Hmm.
and we went to a party with a friend of mine, and this friend, he he was driving me home, and I was just lost in my head, and I was thinking about something musical. I don't know, whatever Steve Vai solo running in my head. And my friend was driving, and all of a sudden the sound of the wheels on the road changed.
Okay.
And he just looked at me and said, Jussi, what do you think? Are the wheels now using more energy or less energy? And that was that light bulb moment where I realized that, holy shit, I'm surrounded by people who are obsessing over this stuff the way that I'm obsessing over music. I'm really in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I'm taking somebody else's spot that would really want to be there, because it wasn't easy to get in.
Hmm.
And I still don't quite know how I got in. I think it was something like zero point 0.2 points over the over the bar. But it was an interesting thing because that was really the moment where I decided that I needed to quit.
Right.
Then I had to figure out how to tell my father.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so then I eventually quit university. I studied for 1 year, and then 2 years I was kind of just drifting,
Mm.
working at a pharmacy, trying to figure out what to do. I started prepping to study music formally eventually after I decided that I had to try it.
And you're now
I,
age
this would be, I would say I was about 21.
21, and you're
Yes.
now you are
Now I'm 19.
now you're 90.
No, no, I'm 40. What am I? 41.
41. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so
So
that's
we have
20
like
years ago.
9 years difference. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So
So
24. Did you say?
21.
No, no, sorry. Yeah. 21. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
But so I made the decision that I need to try to see if I can be a musician. So
Mm.
then, of course, I was very aware that I had so much to catch up on. I didn't know theory very well. I couldn't read a note to save my life. My ear was definitely not as fast as my fingers,
Mm.
and there were so many holes in my foundation that needed work. So I started to take evening classes. I worked the days in the pharmacy, and in the evenings I would take lessons then at this mythical pop jazz conservatory in their adult department,
Yeah.
where you could get in, as I recall, without entrance exams because it was not for a degree. It was
Mm.
just additional education.
Yeah.
And I took some classes also at Sibelius Academies, this Avoin Yliopisto or Open University.
Open
I was
University.
really just trying to absorb as much as I could to try to get in.
Yeah.
And I remember the first year I I applied knowing that I would not get in, but I wanted to see what the entrance exams would be like.
Mm.
And sure enough, I didn't get in, but I knew that, okay, so this is kind of the vibe. Then I prepped another year, worked at the pharmacy, and kept practicing. And then I got in 2003. I think I got in from the waiting list.
Yeah.
And that was really when I then eventually got the news that I was accepted, that somebody hadn't taken the spot and there was one for me. And I started studying there. I really felt like I'd finally found my community of
Mm.
like-minded people who were interested and obsessed with all the same stuff that I was
Yeah.
interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny. I was 21 also when I kind of realized my calling.
Really?
Yeah. And and a year later, when I got in to the guitar making school, I also got in from what is it called? Varasia. What did you say?
Waiting list.
Waiting list. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's so
So,
funny
so
how many parallels there are
so
between us.
yeah. Okay. So just a second. Something happened here with my camera. Yeah. Okay. We're gonna. I'm looking at the time, so we're gonna jump on to. Okay, so you got into the school, and how many years then went the all the years in the United States that came a bit later, yeah.
Yeah, so I studied in Finland for 3 years. Then I went to another higher level school for 1 semester. I took a break because I started to have gigs. I wanted to try my hand at being a freelance musician
Yeah.
more. And I was playing with some well-known pop artists in Finland at the time. And then I went back to school for 1 semester. And then I started to feel like I couldn't really handle the work that I was getting. And in Finnish culture, you don't say no to gigs.
Yeah.
So I was kind of in this tricky situation where I felt I was really grateful to be asked, but I felt like I was only getting asked because people knew that I would do my homework. But I
Yeah.
still there were a few shows and one particular tour that I felt like I'm not ready for this yet. I need to, put things on hold and I need to go
Right.
practice. And I got the opportunity to go to Berkeley College of Music, and
How did
I
that
just
happen? How did that opportunity happen?
it's a kind of a crazy story. I was just at the conservatory in Helsinki, and I was just minding my business, and all of a sudden, I think it was something like either somebody told me or then I heard somebody speaking in an American accent in the hallway or something like that, and then I was like, oh, the Berkeley people are here.
Right.
Because it's the school in Helsinki. It's a Berkeley International Network School, so Berkeley would come and audition people for scholarships for Berkeley, and I I went because I'd heard about Berkeley since I was a teenager
Yeah.
reading Guitar Player. That okay,
Yeah.
Aldi Meola went there, and Steve Vai went there, and Petrucci went there, and I don't all the jazz guitar
Yeah.
players that I knew at the time had gone there. So it was another mythical destination.
Yeah.
So I just went to the Berkeley people in Helsinki and I said, "Do you have a moment? I'd just like to ask some information. What's your school about?" And the man who was there, he just said, "Why don't you come and audition?" I, what? Okay, when? Tomorrow after
Okay.
lunch. So, all right. I I went and I called some friends of mine. I think there was I forget it was on drums, but I know it was Kalle Ylitalo was on bass and Lasse Piirainen was on keys. And
Right.
we went and we played Affirmation by George Benson
Okay.
the next. And I was just surprised. They gave me a scholarship, and I really didn't really know what I was doing. It was a partial scholarship, but it was still this kind of a inkling of something that wow, could there be an opportunity here?
Yeah.
And then it took me a few years to figure out the rest of the finances, but there was a private donor who was really supportive of what I was doing
Right.
and who I've become very good friends with. And she just offered to pay for this education without me even asking for it. Just called me one day and I said, I was thinking, could I give you this gift? And this as being a Finn, you don't take gifts like that
Yeah.
lightly.
Yeah.
So I really had to take a long time to really think about it. And then I decided that, I have to accept it's such a gift.
Yeah.
So because of her generosity, I was able to go to Berkeley and I thought I'd be there for 1 year, but I ended up staying 13 years in the States. So I moved there in
Wow.
2008. So
2008. Yeah.
yeah. So I
Okay.
finished Berkeley in 2 years and then I went to New England Conservatory for my master's. And then I just kept working and there was so many, it was such a challenging environment to be in musically and creatively. And I got to meet so many people that also tied in with my history from the Middle East and Africa and
Yeah.
being around all the incredible musicians from all over the world. It was just this really inspiring environment to that really kicked my ass.
Yeah. Okay. And when because well we watched the tune from your upcoming album, and you're playing fretless guitar. You play and you play the oud, or how do you say that? Is it
Oud,
oud?
yeah.
Oud, yeah. When did this instrument come into play or into your kind of musical vocabulary? Is that was it already since the pop jazz conservatory in Finland, or did it come along like later?
It coincided with when I started the conservatory. It was one of these things where when we had this acoustic fusion duo, then trio, then quartet with Mr. Crab, it was everything that I seemed to be writing and composing. Everything always had some kind of trace of the Arabic influence.
Right.
It wasn't a conscious thing. It was just something that I noticed every time I was writing something on the guitar. I was really gravitating towards sounds that I was slowly becoming aware that I could trace their roots to somewhere in the Middle
To your
East.
childhood, yeah.
Yeah, and they always made me feel at home. So then in 2003, I went backpacking in northern Morocco, just a solo trip to clear my head. And I don't know why, but I had this instinct that I must buy an oud.
Right.
And I did. And then when I got back to Helsinki, I discovered that at the conservatory there was an Egyptian oud player teaching,
Okay.
coincidentally, Aladdin Abbas. And I took some initial lessons with him and played in his ensemble. And that's where the oud came into the picture. And through that, I started to kind of trace the, just pull on that thread that always led me
Yeah.
back to the music of Kulthum and Farid al-Atrash, Sabah Fakhri, Wadi al-Safi, all these things that I'd heard, Fairuz, that I'd heard when I was living in the Middle East.
Right.
And it really made me feel at home.
Yeah.
So that's how that kind of got into the picture.
Yeah. And so you moved to the States. That was 2008, and like fast forwarding a few years, you were still living in the States when you released your first solo album, right?
Yeah. So On came out in 2013.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to those who haven't heard, well, you can find Jussi's music on the typical platform Spotify and others. So have a look. The first album is there, and also the first single of the new album is there already. Yeah, and obviously in the first solo album on, it's kind of it's getting together. It like definitely, but I guess at that, like comparing now, okay, not let's not go there, or why not? Like thinking of the first album and then the second album. I mean, it's been 9 years,
Yeah.
right? It's 9 years.
It has. Yeah.
Where have you been? What took you so long? I like, yeah.
You know,
It's a very big question. I know.
it's a
Sorry.
huge question. It's the honest answer is that I really didn't know until fairly recently where I was in
Yeah.
like those 9 years.
Yeah,
And
we've
this is
actually,
not to try to sound any more
yeah,
cryptic than necessary, but it was On was released, it was kind of a collection of original pieces of music and then my arrangement of John Coltrane's Naima
yeah,
that I'd accumulated over the years. And then I recorded it right after I finished Berkeley, but then released it right after, or in my last year of NEC. But there was a sort of innocence to that record where, it's kind of like maybe if you had this the first time you get a new pedal or something like that, it's just this joy of discovery and everything
yeah,
is very innocent and everything is new and fresh and exciting. That album for me was that. But then I think partially I felt like I've always matured later than people my age. And I think part of it is just me being me, but I think part of it might have to do with the fact that I had so much to process from all the moving back and
Mm.
forth and really figuring out who I am as an individual and what is my own expression and all these kinds of things. And after I think I was kind of in a space where I'd now been in the educational system for quite a long time.
Mm.
And I think I learned too many rules that they started to suffocate part of the creativity, where I felt like I started to question, you know, on I think an unhealthy degree, what I was allowed to do
Mm.
and what I was allowed to express. And part of it has to do with, you know, being in between all of these different cultures, just
Yeah.
as a person and as the how I express myself socially, what my values are, what my ethics are, all of that, just who I am as a person.
Mm.
And it it also coincided with a certain kind of awakening of I suppose social awareness and social consciousness in me.
Yeah.
Again, that came a little bit late compared to some of my some people the same age. Also, definitely influenced by the whole cultural climate of being in the U.S.
Yeah.
and all of it's such a complicated, multi-layered history that that country has, and then being a musician where you're really dealing with the meanings of cultures.
Mm.
Every gig you'd play, there would be people from all over the world, all different kinds of walks of
Yeah.
life. So I felt simultaneously a little bit creatively blocked
Yeah.
and
Yeah. You mentioned
questioning,
that somewhere. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. The creative
questioning
block.
what I was allowed to express. But at the same time, there was a deeper layer to that that I didn't really know what it was. And it took until 2018 that certain things just collided in my personal life. And then that really woke me up. And there, I realized that there was a lot of things that I needed to take a look at in terms of family history,
Right.
my own, just in terms of the relationships within the family, and then also my own history as it relates to culture.
Yeah. You've
And
talked about that the new album, like thematically speaking, that it's about growing up, but even more, you've used the term it's more about growing out of the in between.
yep,
Yeah, which kind of like when you're explaining it now, growing up, like you yeah, like you phrased it, between the cultures, like so. So kind of like what we talked about earlier, like you know, the guy outside looking in, but then or is it like that, or is it something else?
I think for I've been on both sides of that where I don't think I can say that I've ever felt like I've belonged to any culture. And I
Yeah,
include Finnish culture in this very much as well.
yeah,
But I've had, I think, various degrees of, let's say, concern about that. And it's
yeah,
kind of ebbed and flowed. And the yeah, I mean, I think it took a long time for me to just come to terms with it. I thought I had done the work on. I thought that that was kind of
mm,
okay. This is who I am, and this is how I can express it. But there was so much more there, and there's all. I think because I tend to have a fairly high level of empathy towards people, and I think sometimes to a maybe unhelpful degree, unhelpful towards myself, that I put others
mm,
often before myself in the way that I operate. That being in the States and in the cultural discourse there, you start to become very, very aware of the fact that you are perceived as a white man, for instance.
Yeah.
And that represents something to other people that you may not have been aware of in the same way. And at the same time, you're feeling like, okay, so I'm welcomed by my colleagues, the musicians that I'm working with, and I was playing with people from Palestine, from Jordan, from Turkey, from Senegal, from the United States, from Colombia. I mean, all over the world. But I still felt I think I was going through this social awakening of what's my role in this? What can I do? What is respectful? I don't want to take advantage. I don't want to steal. But at the same time, all of this hybridity feels so natural to me because that's all I'd known since I was 6.
Yeah.
So how do I navigate that? So that kind of was that that started to kind of close down the musical expression. But then I learned also that there was a big part of it that had to do with my role in the family, and I'd had to give space to others in the family and then rather be the quiet one, but also, funny enough, being in between others in the family. So there was a lot to unpack there, and that's I think I said in one of the interviews I did for this album in the album trailer that this record is really like a coming out party for me because I felt it took a long time for me to work through that and understand what this entanglement and this knot that had been growing for those 9 years
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, you used somewhere, I think in one of the interviews, you used the term that you found a way to untie yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what it felt like because it was something that started to really kind of get to the core of me being free
Yeah.
to express myself. And then when certain things clicked there, I started to dare to explore it more musically. And I'd always had a huge amount of support from my mentors like Simon Shaheen or Mick Goodrick or so all the people that I'd studied with from these different traditions, they were so supportive of what I was doing, as were my fellow musicians. So I think the problem was more within me. But then when I started to resolve that, and I remember the Veil, the piece that you played, that was really the kind of breakthrough when that middle section with all the dissonance and the strings and the horns rubbing against each other.
Which is super powerful. Like, wow.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
still don't quite
Anyway.
know where that came from, but that was the breakthrough moment of
Yeah, yeah.
when that came, I knew that, okay, I will be able to compose a record.
Yeah, so you
And
got through the creative block.
yeah, and that it was really that's why for me the Veil is such an important piece of music, and it's just the opening movement of the 5 movement suite, but it's still that that was really the thing that opened the floodgates.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm very happy for you that you found a way to untie yourself and found like you've said about the album, about thematically about growing up and growing out. I think I've talked about this same process in some of my videos, my personal journey. You know, like I think I've phrased it like growing up from a 35-year-old little boy to a 50-year-old grown up
Yeah.
who doesn't need to worry anymore, you know, what other people think of me, you know, who takes full responsibility of myself, you know,
Yeah.
or don't need to be scared anymore. Because it's like all different perspectives to the same thing. I mean that's in my experience, even if my childhood has been far from the worst kind, It could have been. But there's been this undercurrent for me that, that one of the reasons being moving from place to another, which has its own reasons. I mean, why didn't my parents settle to any given place? It tells something about them and their restlessness and maybe trauma or whatever. And that as long as that undercurrent was there, most of the time in the subconscious, and then making its appearances in all those moments where emotions were involved, without me realizing what's driving me.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds very. It's hard to know those. There's so many mechanisms that are working
Yeah,
automatically, and it's hard to know what's driving you
yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. And when that through whatever process it's kind of like it's. I'm very happy for you that you found a way through that, because I have as well. And when that knot or that undercurrent has melted away, it's just so much easier to be, to just to be who I am without the need to prove anything, in a way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny also because there are so many great books and so many great films that explain all this to the dot, like, any person with somewhat normal intelligence, reading that book or watching that film, like I would in my 20s. I would read so much biographies, self-help books, and all kinds of books that had all the answers, that explained all these things and these mechanisms and these traumas and these growing up process, and I had no difficulties in understanding the answers. And and after reading this book or watching that film, having the feeling that, yeah, now I get it, I'm a changed man.
Yeah.
And the effect would last like 2 days max. And then you're back at because it's that's not how it happens, that's not how it works. The kind of like the realizing something with an eye open, it's an inner process that just cannot be read from the books. And as long as you don't realize something, you just, damn it, you just don't get it. You just keep banging your head to the wall, like I did a long time. Yeah,
I
the
think
change is very
it's
easy.
I I definitely lacked the humility to really look in the mirror,
Oh
and
yeah, that's the one of the key things, and for
because
myself as well, definitely, yes, absolutely.
yeah, because I remember, you know, and it speaks to the position of being in between. I felt like I was so often in between members of the family as a translator, and I was in between friends often as a translator. I was in between cultures sometimes as a musical translator. So I think my mechanisms, without me necessarily realizing them, they had become this kind of thing that I can fix things. So I was that guy who was saying to friends, "You
Oh
need
man,
therapy."
there are so much parallels. We have to, like, there's Finnish ways, of course, to go to sauna, right?
Yep.
So we've that is something we have to do. We have to talk about this stuff. So much
Yeah.
parallels, and like you're like reading story of my life right now, telling the story of my
So
life.
funny. No, because for me it was really this thing of I was the guy telling other people, you know, you should talk to somebody, you need therapy. But then when somebody would recommend that to me, I would I would not say maybe no outright, but I would be so fucking stubborn that I would just, try to weasel my way out of it. And it wasn't until I remember like late summer 2018, certain things had happened, and I was really down, and I was out for a walk with a very good friend, and he's older gentleman, much more experienced in life than I am, and he just said, looked me straight in the eyes, said, "Jussi, you need a teacher," and that was when it clicked.
Yeah.
Because he put the therapy thing in words that made sense with me. I was never against learning from people. I was never against having a mentor in music. So then, why would I be so not humble and so stubborn that I don't accept that I need a teacher for certain life things? And that was the thing that really started the whole process that then eventually led to the music. But it took that friend to really say the right words. And then
Great.
after that, I had nothing. I was just, what's the word in English? Aseeton. Like I'd been disarmed
Yeah,
completely.
yeah. I don't know if I should laugh or I should cry because this is so much from like you're telling again like my about my life. But anyways, we're swimming in deep deep waters, but I'm gonna bring out a totally different kind of a question now. We have to listen to our viewers. Hannu is saying, what about the guitar? The fretless 7-string, tell us about that, please. I can see it in the background.
Yeah, so this is
So guys, this is called product placement.
yeah, so this is the beautiful guitar that Juha and the Ruokangas family built for me. So it's a 7-string Duke Artisan Custom, and it has a sustainer pickup also in the front. And it was one of those things where, because of the nature of the music, I knew that I was going for a lot of microtones that are very much an influence from the Arabic music that I had heard since I was a kid, and I couldn't quite play them on guitar. I mean, I could bend, but the ideas that I was having, I needed a fretless guitar. I had one, but I needed a better one. So, Juha and I had crossed paths at some trade shows in
Yeah.
NAM and at Frankfurt Musikmesse a long time ago, and I'd always fantasized of having a Ruokangas. But then I finally dared to approach the man,
A very
and
scary man, you know.
turned out not so bad. And yeah, so this is the result. It's an incredible instrument, and it actually the guitar didn't quite make it on time. There were so many COVID related delays
Yeah.
because I was composing the music, imagining the guitar, and I was
Yeah.
composing for an imaginary guitar and imaginary ideas that I could play with the fretless. And we recorded the basic tracks of the album live, and then I just had to go in and overdub the fretless guitar parts, because I think the guitar came to Boston the week or just 2 days after I got back from those initial
Yeah, because there was
sessions.
something even like really funny going on with the shipping as well. I remember that it
Yeah,
was just in this limbo like forever.
yeah,
And yeah, we were supposed to get it to you in time, but yeah, it was crazy. And with a lot of things. This was at the height of the COVID related all sorts of weird stuffs going on. And shipping stuff was one of the biggest nightmares at the time. But anyways, so you got the guitar
yeah,
and I remember with the Sustainiac and we even tried, I think, wasn't it so that you had an interest to the Valbucker guitar,
yeah.
to the tube pickup thing, and you had a concern because you wanted the Sustainiac,
Yeah.
and we actually even tried to we tried to morph these two systems into one guitar, and at that point of time just could not find a way, because we were kind of dealing with these two systems that are both rather prone to interference,
Yeah.
with audio interference, with different kinds of quite challenging systems to make them work smooth. And then when we put those two things into the same guitar, it was just. I'm not saying it's impossible, but at that time we couldn't find a way. So we ended up doing, and that at that point, yeah, it was going to be first 6-stringed, because must be because we didn't have a 7-stringed Valbucker possibility at the time, maybe, or did we? No.
No, I don't think so, because I remember when we were testing the prototype, when I came by your workshop and I was testing the Valbucker fretless
Duke, I think,
prototype.
Yeah.
There was also the thing there that I felt that I loved the Valbucker tone on fretted guitar.
Yeah, but there was no way of telling.
But on fretless, there was something that it didn't quite have the sound that I was looking for.
Yeah.
And then when we decided that we won't do the Valbucker one, then I thought, but okay, so then
Let's
what
swap
if
7-string?
Yeah, because I thought that if we're going for this, this is pretty custom as it is, being fretless and all. So
Yeah.
what if the 7-string? Because I thought about extended range stuff, and I was writing for a nonette. We had all these different instruments that you heard on the video. That maybe the 7-string could add some extra range that I could use, and it definitely did. But the funny thing is, when we went to do the session, remember when you'd sent me the Valbucker Duke to test?
Yes.
That's before I sent it onward
To Sonny Landreth or guitar player.
Yeah, exactly.
Or somewhere. Yeah.
No, I sent it to Sonny.
Yeah. That's
and
right.
So I had it in the studio, and that guitar is on the album. It's
Okay.
you hear it in the fourth movement, verso. There's the fretted electric stuff. That's the other Ruokangas.
People,
that I have
product placement. Just kidding. Wait a minute. Stefan says fretless and sustainiac pickup totally sounds like making sense. It does. It does. It offers certain possibilities that totally. It's a match. It's a match. Hannu is asking, is the tuning standard 7-string?
Yeah, I normally keep it in standard with a low B on the bottom, but I have experimented with having basically DAD, GAD on the top and a low A
Right.
on the bottom. There's a piece on my first album on called Nukussi that I sometimes play like that.
Okay.
So it's still a fairly new instrument, so I'm really exploring all the different kinds of sonics that you can get out of it.
Yeah, and I also remember that we forgot a detail. We forgot to make one detail to the guitar, but then we did it later when you visited. Yeah, the cymbal and the. Right now, I think
Can you see that?
the connection is so kind of bad that it's pretty blurry, so we can't probably see.
Okay. Huh.
But anyway,
there's an unsymbol there.
So how we solved that was that we invited Jussi to visit our shop. So just for that little inlay, he flew to Finland from the other side of the planet, and we made an inlay and or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, great excuse to hang out.
Yes, absolutely. But we didn't get to go to sauna together yet. It will happen.
it will happen.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna that was the product placement part, and we're moving on with my next question. This podcast was titled "Making Music Between Cultures." You also use the term transcultural music, and you're also doing your doctoral research currently at the Sibelius Academy about kind of revolving around this stuff. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So how have your endeavors been received at the university?
I think so far it's been very positive. There's a lot of people who are. I think more and more it's the world is it's so interconnected on so many different levels that there is a lot of interest in research about these things. Basically, what I'm researching is maybe it's a little bit of a cop out because it's kind of just a formal way of formalizing what I do in music anyway, and what I've been doing in music since my late teens, I would say, which is try to navigate ways to express these multiple cultural musical influences from this in between position.
Yeah.
And so I'm researching how different musical elements behave when they're in different musical environments, when they're recontextualized that way. So, and trying to find some kind of a method to the madness. And is there any methodology to doing it in a way that isn't just, layering oil and water on top of one another, so that to find some kind of a more organic blend of these things.
Yeah. We were talking about this stuff earlier, and you also told me that even though the feedback has been largely positive, but there's been also kind of like how do you say, clashes, other kinds of opinions, or I think you even mentioned like the kind of like the fine line when like you already said earlier, kind of referred to yourself as white male person. So you're a white male person from.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I have to
Yes.
just to clarify. I forget my exact words, but what I meant was that I can be perceived
Yes,
as
exactly. Yes.
that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
not
right.
a reflection on how I necessarily would
Yeah,
define
exactly.
myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's a good. Thank you for correcting. So you are perceived, obviously, like
Sure.
myself, as a
Yeah.
white male person, and from this perceived position, there's kind of like a fine line, or easily misunderstood when we talk about making transcultural music, that it could also be perceived as cultural appropriation, I guess, by
Sure.
some.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think in many ways it's understandable given the history of the world and
Yeah,
what people who some on some level could be said to have looked like me have done in the past. So
yeah.
I understand that there is concern.
For those people, just in case, some of our listeners, most probably know, but if there's someone who's not familiar with the term cultural appropriation, the term, this is a direct quote from Wikipedia. Cultural appropriation is the inappropriate or unacknowledged adoption of an element or elements of one culture or identity by members of another culture or identity, basically. And this can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from minority cultures. This is what Wikipedia says about cultural appropriation, and and I guess that well, obviously, like you say, it is very very understandable, and as we are kind of at that point of history where where different cultures are, as we speak, kind of dealing with this trauma and dealing with this the trauma caused by centuries of wrongdoing and so on. So it's obviously very understandable, and yet at the same time thinking of what music is about. Like, if we go way back, like, what is music? What was music? What is music? Like, if I once there was this very cool radio interview with Pekka Kuusisto, and he said, he kind of like saying that it would be quite difficult, if there would come an alien in a spaceship to planet Earth, and in their culture they would not have the concept of music. That how do you explain to that alien what is music? Because it is such a music is such like integral part of human experience, and sort of like going to the Stone Age, to the rhythm and to the heartbeat and to the very to the very 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 roots of humanity, and music being actually probably the very first universal language, which has remained. So to just as a kind of like looking at this phenomenon like from different perspectives, at the same time, yes, understandable that it can be perceived as cultural appropriation, but on the other hand, it is actually the opposite. It is the identity of who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very. I mean, to answer your previous question, that yes, there have been concerns and questions raised about what I do at these academic institutions. And I applied to several when I was applying for my doctorate, and one in particular felt that I wasn't addressing the topic of cultural appropriation sufficiently in my research proposal. But I think it's just one of these things that my view is that it's a much more multi-layered, nuanced, complicated topic than the spirit in which it's often discussed. It's kind of it's this term that is fairly well known these days, and it's fairly easy to toss around. And in Finland, in particular, I think now I've been away from Finland since 2008, but my understanding, looking at it from afar, is that there's definitely the question of the Sami people and their culture, and what the dynamic has been between the Finnish people, who are the majority in Finland, and the Sami people in the north, and all that. So I think a lot of the discourse on cultural appropriation within the Finnish context has a lot to do with Sami culture, and I think I should probably stop there, because I don't feel like I can speak too much to the Finnish context, again, because I lived so much of my life outside Finland. But I think it's what I've always been very clear about in my own work and the way that I conduct myself is, first of all, I think it's essential to give credit where credit must be given. In other words, I think my influences and my inspirations and my sources, they have to be acknowledged. So there's, I think that's, I feel like it's the bare minimum debt owed. And that goes from, Paco de Lucia to Jimi Hendrix to Dmitri Shostakovich to Kulthum, Paco de Lucia. I already said that. Children of Bodom. You get the idea. I mean, there's
Yeah.
just so many influences that have brought me to where I am, because I've learned so much from listening and studying their music. And at the same time, if I think about somebody with a history similar to mine, just to take it out of me personally for a moment, how do you define that person's culture actually? And when it comes to things like cultural appropriation, a lot of the time, like in the Wikipedia quote that you had, talked about dominant culture and the minority culture,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a power dynamic
Yeah.
there. But I think what I have learned just from my life experience and dealing with people from so many different parts of the world is that at the end of the day, we're individuals. And I think I would be, it would be very difficult for me to judge a person's culture by some physical characteristic that I perceive. So, because I find that kind of thinking to be quite reductive. And if we're on a mission to try to fight things like stereotyping or
Yeah.
grouping people, then I think we should be very, very careful with what assumptions we make about a person's culture.
Yeah.
And then in the case of people who have some kind of a hybrid mix of culture, which is where I would position myself as well,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to very clearly delineate, okay, so if it's a hybrid culture, then what is the position of that culture in relation to other cultures in terms of power? Is it dominant? Is it minority? Is it
Yeah.
dominant, not dominant? All those kinds of things. It that's what I mean when I say that the conversation, I think, should be a lot more nuanced
Yeah.
than it is. And I don't say this in a way to try to redeem myself. I would apply this to any individual,
Yeah. I think
just so
it's
that we don't reduce people to
yeah.
what we think they represent.
Yeah. I think it's largely also like the, when we have a sort of some big trauma, big wrongdoing that's going on for a long time in countless different ways,
Right.
and then when that is like brought up and we start, or the cultures, the people, whoever is concerned, start dealing with it, like we can say kind of similar dynamics with anything, with homosexuality, or with Me Too, or things that were taboo once, and then you start dealing with it. So it's this pendulum movement that you kind of go from that taboo that we don't talk about, you go to the other extreme, and then it takes a lot of movement back and forth and back and
Yeah.
forth and back and forth until you come to a point where things are still, and kind of it kind of becomes more kind of deeply understood with all the
Yeah.
nuances in it in any given.
Yeah, and I think there's also I think that and I say this out of my own experience has been that the people who often are concerned about cultural appropriation vis-a-vis some culture or another, they're often not members of that culture or
Yeah,
wouldn't consider themselves members of that culture.
yeah, yeah,
And membership in itself is a very complicated topic that I don't have any clear
yeah,
answers
yeah,
to. But I find that a lot of the time,
yeah,
in my experience, like speaking only about working with elements and influences from Arabic music, I have never had any concerns raised by any of my Arabic mentors, like
yeah,
Simon Shaheen, Bassam Saba, Najib Shaheen, Ziad Sahab,
yeah,
Nizar Rohana, or the guys in my band. I remember I was talking in that 9 year period where I was creatively stuck because I was overthinking this. Again, like I said, this overdeveloped sense of empathy towards others. Nassim Alatrash, who plays cello in my nonet, he's like family to me, Palestinian cellist, and he's somebody who he's very very deeply versed and learned in the Arabic tradition of playing maqam, and also he plays jazz and he plays classical music in the quote unquote Western sense. So he's also drawing from many different roots, musically speaking. But he and I have been very good friends for a long time. And I remember when I was really struggling with writing, he just looked at me like, "Jussi, you 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 think too much. Just play, man." So I mean, but this has often been my experience talking with the people who from the outside might be considered to be of or might be
yeah,
considered to be representative of that culture.
mm,
They're more like, in my experience, they've been, yeah, this is interesting. This is a
yeah, yeah,
new
yeah, yeah, yeah,
kind of take. But that's not to say that I don't claim that I have any answers to like this is the
yeah,
correct way to do this or this is the best way to do this. But I'm just trying to find musical ways to make this mix that I've become
yeah,
resonate outward, if that makes sense.
yeah. And I think you, so far, what I've heard with the album, haven't heard the whole album. Yeah, you've succeeded. It is
Thank you.
somehow it is very with just the first track, the veil. Yeah, it's outstanding and just it's you.
Thank you. No, from you,
and
that really means a lot.
and and it's really fascinating. People, if you haven't watched on YouTube on Jussi's channel or on, I think it's on Jussi's website as well, the kind of trailer videos about making the album, and with little interviews not only by Jussi but also the other musicians, and it's super fascinating to watch those things. I remember I can't remember the names of the guys, but it was the percussionist guy who just, I think he was asked something about, I don't know how it felt and he just answers that it was like there's this kind of parallel of excitement and being terrified because
That's Keita Gawa.
yeah, because the music is so it's like complex, and well, he didn't explain it, but like putting it into the context what others were saying, kind of like in the similar kind of realms of like that. Wow, how am I gonna deal with this stuff? Because this is so, yeah.
It's. I mean, I still pinch myself that these guys want to play with me. I mean, they're all like family to me.
Yeah,
And because the music, as I was writing, it started to become clear to me that I was actually writing about this, like we were talking about growing up and growing out
yeah,
of the in between, and this knot at the root of not finding a way to express myself, the family history, the cultural history, and all that kind of thing. It got so personal by accident. It wasn't intentional. I just, I had these impulses that, okay, this movement has to be called this movement
yeah,
has to be called that, and this is that. And I was working, and then at a certain point in the process, I realized that it was really a narrative arc that was very deeply personal. So then, when I'd figured out what the instruments were, and I started to think, okay, who can I ask to play this music? I knew that they'd have to be, first of all, incredible musicians, but even before that, they'd have to be very, very sensitive individuals who would have the empathy and the personal depth to interpret this music. So I just, for every one of the guys, there was only one option.
right.
And fortunately, every one of them said yes. And, for me to listen to like what Keita Ogawa said about that, he was kind of scared going into it. And
Yeah,
then there's a lot of other interview footage that I haven't released yet, but it's in Finnish, we say korvat punottaa. My ears are going red when I'm listening to that, because to me, these people, they're giants. And to have them as part of the family and playing this music, it's incredible. But I think, the other part of it was that this was really composed in the middle of COVID. So I
yeah,
was in my basement in Boston, and then I was by Lake Saimaa at a cottage, mökki, and then I was back in my basement in Boston, and I don't exactly. I mean, my put it this way, my impression was that in Finland, at least at the time, it was a bit looser, at least in that period of COVID, with
mm,
social interaction, and you could get together. In Boston, things were shut down.
yeah, yeah,
So as I was writing, I was just scoring everything direct into Sibelius.
yeah.
And so a lot of the music became much more through composed than it would have probably become if I had been trying to put this together in normal circumstances, because
Okay,
I had to hear everything.
okay.
So
So
I
I
think
have a
when the guys
question
get,
here. I have a question here that I'm going to bring up right now because it's kind of this. Stefan asks, is the music completely composed, notated, or is there also some space for improvisation?
it's both. So it's definitely more through composed than anything I've ever done because of the circumstances. We had 2 days of rhythm section rehearsals that we could do.
Mm,
And then a month later, we had 2 days of rehearsals with the full band before we went into the studio. So it just wasn't safe
yeah,
to do it. So because of that, it ended up becoming quite through composed. But there's a lot of improvisations, like in the Veil, Utar Artun's piano solo is completely improvised, and there's there's improvisation happening in every movement.
yeah.
So it's a combination.
Okay, we've. I'm seeing that this is becoming one of the marathon episodes that happens to me from time to time. Those who have been watching, listening to my podcast already know it. But yeah, so we are now kind of like half an hour overtime already.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we're gonna take a little closure before I kick you out from my show. The album will be out when?
So it's out October 14th internationally, on Challenge Records International. First single is out already. Second single, The Weaver, is coming out on streaming actually this Friday, and the video will come out next week. And yeah, I mean, album release concert will be in Rockport, Massachusetts, at the Shaolin Liu Performance Center on November 6th.
Yeah.
And I'm really, really excited about that. Because of scheduling, unfortunately, Jason Palmer, who played trumpet and flugelhorn, and Bulut Gulen, who played trombone on the album, are unable to join us for that. But we have Herman Mehari subbing for Jason, and we have Robin Eubanks on trombone. So that's going to be exciting. And we're doing a tour of Finland at the end of February that I'll announce soon. There's a few moving parts that I still need to nail down, but
Yeah,
we're definitely
we
coming to
talked
Finland.
about this a little bit. Congratulations, by the way. You did a very successful Indiegogo campaign recently. I think some of our podcast listeners, viewers might have been contributing to the campaign. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
And there's still time to take part. I think I noticed a couple of weeks time the Indiegogo is still open, and so everybody go have a look what it's all about. But I'm gonna just the and in Finland, you said there are a few moving parts. Is the plan still to do this with a complete 9-piece band?
Yes.
It is. Wow.
Yeah. And that ties in with it.
I can't wait for this. This is going to be so cool, man.
Yeah, that's the thing. If I had all the money in the world, I would be playing everywhere that I can. But with a 9-piece band and all the logistics of that, I mean, most of the guys are Boston, New York. Laith Sadiq lives in Madrid, Bulut Gulen in Istanbul. So we're really trying to tour as much as possible. But that's why now that the Indiegogo goal was reached so quickly for the production cost of the album, now anything that comes before October 13th will go towards getting us on the road.
Yeah.
So
Stefan is asking also, no plans for concerts in Europe outside Finland?
I'm really working hard on that. It's like I said, finances are challenging, and I just moved from Boston to Amsterdam, so I'm now based in central mainland Europe. But yeah, give me a venue and give me an opening, and we'll be there. I'd love to play.
So hey, people, let's send messages to the universe. We have to get Jussi's band on the road in the mainland Europe. Yeah. We're very much over time. Jussi, it's been a joy.
Likewise, it's always good to hang out. And to everybody out there, thank you for listening. Thank you for your comments, questions, and if you contributed to the Indiegogo campaign, I really, really appreciate you. So thank you.
Thank you. Love your music. Love you. And I love all of you who have stuck with us, watching, listening. So, Jussi, I'll release you to your other activities, or maybe already bedtime.
Probably bedtime by now. But we got to do the sauna, man.
Yeah,
it has to happen.
We're gonna do that. Yeah. So, people, as you heard, there's going to be a tour. And the likelihood to the European tour gets better and better the more of you guys go to Jussi's Indiegogo to help him get his massive band on the road. It's a huge effort, and we all want to help. Right? Right. Good. Okay. Good night,
you
Jussi.
manager?
Huh?
You should be my manager.
Yeah. Okay. So, good night, Jussi. Thank you for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me, Juha. Much love.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you. How will I how will I throw you out of here?
I'll hang up.
Good
Ciao.
night. What happened now? Okay, now I'm back here alone. Thank you, everybody. What a nice person. Jussi, I told you. Jussi is a good human being, didn't I? And he is. Yep, and I'm a lucky man having this privilege being connected to with so many good human beings. That's what this tribe is all about, isn't it? So thank you, love you all. So next Wednesday there will be a new episode. I told you last time I will take this 1 week at a time. It means next week will be a new episode. It's going to be another interview with another super talented artist, this time from Germany, Mr. Ruben Rowe, or I don't know how do you supposed to say that in German, Ruben Rowe or something like that. I'll try it anyways. And amongst other things, we will talk more about what I mentioned earlier, active listening. And we're going to talk about ear training for musicians. It's going to be very interesting, I think. So stay tuned for that. People, take care of your loved ones. Be well. Stay safe. Peace, love, and good music. Good night.